You know what's the scariest thing this season? That's right, your mother. Welcome back to another video. So today I'm gonna be trying something a little different. In the spirit of Halloween and these festive seasons, I actually will be talking about every horror movie I watched this month for Halloween. A little bit of lore on me. I can't do horror films. I never have been. Ever since I was little, I've had just bad experiences when it comes to horror movies. I would watch a movie and then I would get really paranoid. It was a whole thing, right? You can even ask my friend APS Entertainment about it. Thanks, AP. I appreciate that. And so for the last couple of years, I've been doing this thing where I watch one movie a day, and at the end of this year, I'm gonna do a big video where I talk about every single movie I've watched in 2024. But this year, I decided, why not conquer my fear of horror films and watch the scariest films that I could find on streaming because I did not have time to go to the movies. It's okay, we still made it work. And so because of that, we come down to today. My thoughts on these films as a non-horror movie watcher, but a big time movie watcher. Let's get the show started. Smile. So this is the first horror film I watched this year, and I gotta say, I really enjoyed this film. As a non-horror person, this is a film that I was told not to watch, and so I decided, why not make it the first thing I watch? And from a movie standpoint, I think it's a really fun film. It does a lot in terms of like what it's trying to tell you about trauma and these characters. And in itself is already just an interesting concept, but it's just the way it's executed in this film is really great. And ending leaves off at a point where you're like, wow, this film is succeeded. It succeeded in terms of scaring you, in terms of what it needed to do in order to fulfill its story. Because I feel like most horror films end off with a relatively happy note, because since you spend the majority of the film in this crazy batshit world, you wanna have some kind of peace at the end. But this film says fuck you. It's obviously a perfect segue into Smile 2, and I just want to learn more about this world, more about this curse, for lack of better words. But overall, I give it a solid 9 Spider-Mans out of 10. Werewolf by Night. Now this isn't technically a horror film, but I think it follows a lot of those classic horror tropes, and I think it'd be fun to bring it up again. If you saw my video last year, I made a video on Werewolf by Night, but this time I watched the version in color. The original one I really love, and I really liked the Werewolf in color one because I think their use of color in this is so beautiful. This is one of the best color graded projects I've seen this year, and you can tell there's a lot of attention to detail to every frame, and the colors are just so vibrant. The first film is obviously trying to mimic those old horror films, and this film mimics something later, but it still feels like an old film, and I really appreciate it for that. But if you do want more thoughts on just that project alone, go and check out my video on that. Werewolf by Night, 8.5 Spider-Mans out of 10. Okay, so now we move on to The Purge. Now, this is where I decided, why don't I follow a series? Purge is what I decided to go for. Plus, it was readily available on streaming services, so that worked. And in terms of this first one, so the first Purge film was just okay. It wasn't a bad film. I don't think it was amazing. It didn't really blow my mind in any way. The idea of this existing in our real society feels a little bit far-fetched, if I'm being honest. This just doesn't feel like something that could or would ever exist. Now, with that being said, it is a pretty small scale story, this first one at least, and the later ones like go way bigger. For the most of the story, a single location. As you're gonna see with later Purges films, there's lore here. There's continuity here. There's a character named Dante who he's not even named in this first one. He's just called the Bloody Stranger, who is like a homeless guy who is just running away from people trying to kill him. With the kid of the main character saves him, and yeah, and then he later comes back as like a freedom fighter. It's a whole thing. But yeah, this first one's okay. The acting was like whatever to me. The story was, besides the obviously the purge aspect, the main character's drama felt very bland in my opinion. I don't know. I couldn't. It's a solid 5 Spider-Mans out of 10. Okay, so now we've got Purge Anarchy, and this film is better than the first one. The story scale is a lot bigger. There's more going on here. I think the cast, you feel a little bit more connected to them, which for these films is not a lot. As long as somebody's not a complete piece of shit trying to kill somebody else, you're gonna like the character, and that's exactly what this film has. There's not really much more to say besides that. The film in itself, like I said, it doesn't do anything crazy, and so because of that, I'm only gonna give it 5.5 Spider-Mans out of 10. So now we move on to the third installment, The Purge Election Year, and I think this one was actually a lot better than the last two, and my favorite out of the Purge series. This one was far more interesting. I liked the political approach because that's kind of where I think the story should have gone from the beginning. The idea of the Purge occurring feels very politically based, and so I'm glad that this film finally utilized that to its advantage. And the main character she's a fucking politician, and also the dude from the homeless guy from the first movie comes back as said freedom fighter. It's just a better film overall. There's only one glaring issue, which is that this place, I don't know, maybe I'm just going crazy, but this takes, from what I understand, this takes place like 20 years after the last film, and Frank Grillo's in both of them, and he looks exactly the same in both of them. I don't know, man. Also Dante, he looks exactly the same as he did in the first film. It really does not make much sense to me, but whatever. I'm gonna give this a 6 Spider-Mans out of 10. Okay, so now we've got the first Purge, and this film is something. This is an odd film with glowing eyeballs. For some reason, a lot of glowing eyeballs. It's the first Purge. It's an experiment. I didn't care for this film. I think certain story elements were alright, but overall, it just didn't work for me. This is supposed to take place in the past, and it feels like a not as cool version of the first one. The cast was better though. Sure, that's about it. This is a 4 Spider-Mans out of 10. So, of course, continuing with the trend of movie series, I decided to watch the Pearl series. But instead of starting off with X, I watched Pearl first. Why? Because I'm built different. I really enjoyed. I was pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed Pearl. I kind of knew what I was getting into when I was watching the film, and I had so much fun with the film. I think Mia Goth did a great performance here, and as she does in later in this series, right? The visual aesthetic of this film is just so much more interesting, and it's obviously a small scale story, but that's what makes it work, and the practical effects in the film are really good. So, because of this, I'm gonna give it 8 Spider-Mans out of 10. So then I watched X, and X is obviously the precursor to Pearl, and I enjoyed X probably just as much as I enjoyed Pearl. Those two films are really good hand in hand, and it's surreal to see the way they go with each other. X is really good. It's a completely different aesthetic, but it works equally just as well. And it has such a great cast, a lot bigger cast, a brighter cast, and I really enjoyed the film for what it was. And it had some weird gross scenes with old Pearl. Just so uneery, man. Nonetheless, great film. I'm gonna give it also an 8 Spider-Mans out of 10. And then we made it to the third movie in their Pearl/X trilogy, which is Maxine, and by far the worst of the three. Objectively speaking, it is not as good of a film as the first two. Doesn't make it the worst film ever, or a bad film for that matter. I just don't think it was as strong as the other ones. Pearl and X have a very distinctive style and aesthetic that T. West really utilizes to the advantage of the film, and it allows the film to really stand on its own. And even for being an A24 film, it feels very prominent in their already long, huge, amazing roster. I don't know. It didn't do anything new, creative, or interesting that we hadn't already seen with the previous two films. It just felt like it's because those films just had the sauce, and this one didn't have the sauce. Yeah, I'm gonna give it 6 Spider-Mans out of 10. So then, after that point, I decided, okay, let me get into the Terrifier. This was a weird one. I think this was a lower budget film than what I expected it to be, but I was pleasantly engaged way more than I thought. With lower budget films, production value isn't as high. You don't feel the story to be as realistic as you would like it with the high budget films. I would know, right? Whatever. This film gets really creative. I think there's a lot of problematic things with the film, which I don't really need to touch upon, and there's story elements that just feel very bland and basic and generic, but when it does the horror and the gore, it does it well. I mean, dude, the girl's face, man, dude, that shit is so gross in a good way, and the way you get there is not how you expect it to be. It's really good. And just Art the Clown as a concept, as a character, as an actor, as he was really, really good in this film. David Howard Thorne really does a great job in this role. His face is meant for this role. He has a very creepy, gross face. Not in a bad way. No offense. You're doing amazing, boy. You're doing amazing, dude. But he just really works for this film. And gosh, they get really creative with the gore. I mean, the scene where the main girl's friend is hung up upside down and he saws her in half will forever be ingrained in my head. And because of that, I'm going to give it a solid 7 Spider-Mans out of 10. Okay, so then we got Terrifier 2, sequel to Terrifier 1, higher production value. You can feel that it's a higher production value. Still doesn't feel like a big thing, but it does feel bigger. And this is a good film. This is a fun film. The first one felt more grounded until the end of the film, where they start to deal with some demon shit, classic horror stuff, right? But this film just throws that all at the wall and goes full satanic demon mode. And it worked. I don't know if conceptually it's as interesting of a film as the first one. I think the characters are probably a little bit more enjoyable in this one. You're actually rooting for them instead of just waiting to see who Art kills. And like I said, this one is more in line with spirituality, Satanism, things like that. And I think it works for the most part. And of course, that bedroom scene. Oh my god, that bedroom scene. This one's getting a 6.5 Spider-Mans out of 10. And now one of my more anticipated films, Late Night with the Devil. This is a film that I wanted to see last year, but I didn't get a chance to, and now I'm really excited that Hulu has dropped it, and this film really blew my expectations away. It almost had the same effect for me that Smile did, in the sense that this felt like more than just a horror film, a scary movie. This was just a good film in general. I had a great story, a great cast, fantastic production value, and the fact that it all takes place in a single location really worked. And it's the way that this location is done is what really sold me on the film. And so I really enjoyed this movie. And top of that, the styling of this film was just phenomenal. Chef's kiss. Having this late night TV show shot like a movie was genius, and I'm so surprised that other films haven't done this before. Just a really great film overall, and I can't recommend it enough. Because of that, this is getting a 9 Spider-Mans out of 10. Another highly anticipated one. Also, I'm kind of surprised I didn't see this film before, but Blair Witch Project was really cool. It's a really cool concept. Obviously, it led way to the found footage style of filmmaking, and I really like this film. Watching it in 2024 though is another thing. I don't think it has the same impression as if you were there in '99, and obviously there's no way it could have. The build up to this film was probably one of the biggest marketings for any film, and obviously it's obviously controversial because of the fact that this is a fictionalized story, and you know, people got mad that these kids were still okay while people were looking for them. But it works. I think this looks, for the most part, like a documentary, like a pretty realistic documentary. There's acting in this film that really doesn't sell it as being real in certain elements. Because, for example, so I watched this film with my mom, who did not know about the Blair Witch Project leading up to it, and I just said it was a documentary. And then even while we were watching this film, she was like, this is fake, right? But even so, I really enjoyed the film. I really like the aesthetic of it. I'm still gonna give it 8 Spider-Mans out of 10. And then I move on to the grand finale. Now before I talk about the grand finale, I should preface, this is not 30 films. I didn't watch a horror movie every single day. Dude, I gotta switch it up, man. If I watched a horror movie every single day, I would be dead by now. But like I said, you're gonna hear more about what those films are at the end of this year when I talk about every single movie I watched in 2024, which, be ready, that's gonna be a long ass video. The penultimate film that I watched for this year's Halloween was Ma. Was this film something? Ma was an interesting experience. That this film is something that is so bad it's good. I did not know what to expect of Ma, and what I got was Octavia Spencer as a weird pedophile. It was this film was weird. Then she kissed like a 15-year-old boy, and she started inviting little kids over to party and have alcohol in her basement. Yeah, this film is not something I can recommend. There's a lot of issues with this film. The only thing I knew about this film was that really funny trailer that came out when the film was releasing. Yeah, I wish that was all I knew. But yes, that is every horror film I've watched this year. Obviously, it's not as much as I wanted. October has been a very, very busy month for me, so I wish I could have watched more. Still want to watch Terrifier 3. I still want to watch Smile 2. Oh, one film I really wanted to get to, which I didn't get to, but I know I'm gonna make a video on that one day, is Talk to Me. That's another one. But yeah, it has been an interesting experience. Like I said, I've been deeply afraid of horror movies ever since I was little, and so going full throttle was definitely an experience. And the way I ended up doing it was, first of all, I had to watch it when there was at least a little bit of sunlight outside. I was not gonna watch these films at 2 in the morning, because if not, shit would have been bad. I just thought to myself, okay, I'm not gonna watch it as a horror movie. I'm gonna watch it as a film, as I would watch any other film, right? What critiques can I go into it? And obviously, I didn't break down every film. I didn't need to. Like, most of these films don't have a complex story or complex themes or anything like that. They're just gore and have fun type shit, you know. With that being said though, this is definitely an interesting experience. You let me know what you think down in the comments below. And if you saw any of these films or you have any horror film recommendations, let me know. I want to hear what you guys think. I think I'm over my fear now. I feel like I can watch horror movies pretty okay. So that's fun. So thank you for helping me be okay. But as per usual, thank you, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch me talk about your mom. And until next time, see you, Space Cowboys. Also, have a happy Halloween, stay safe, don't eat knives with chocolate.